Welcome to She's Sober Sydney, and our guest today is one of Australia's leading lights in managing anxiety. An educational leader, Dr. Jodi Richardson supports parents and teachers to change their relationship with anxiety, dial it right down, and light the way for their children and students to do the same. Jodi is a professional speaker supporting whole school communities around Australia, the best-selling author of the books Anxious Kids and Anxious Mums. She hosts the popular podcast, Well, Hello, Anxiety, and is a mum of two. Welcome, Jodi.
Hello, Meg. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of your podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. So really, I wanted to have you on because, as some of the listeners will know from my story at the beginning of this podcast, I was a kid with severe anxiety. So I always had generalized anxiety and worried a lot as a younger kid. Like if my mum went out, I'd be worried till she got home. It was constant worry. And then at 17, I developed a social phobia where I was speaking in front of my class at school and just out of nowhere, I started shaking. So that became, for the next 30 or so years, me avoiding situations. And I really had enjoyed speaking. And so it really took away everything I sort of had in my future planned. And it became very secretive, but also I discovered at 18 that alcohol was a handy tool to stop the shaking in the moment. And obviously we know it also made it worse in the long run. But so I really want to talk about, firstly, kids with anxiety and how we can look at causes and strategies and tools to prevent them from doing what I did and turning to alcohol or other substances as a self-medication.
Yes, it's certainly so prevalent among our young people today. Even as little, I've spoken to people who have treated children even as young as 3.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, and how I think how hard for the family, but also how lucky for that little one that somebody recognized it and sought some help. But yes, when it comes to the causes, there are many. And what we say in science is it's multifactorial, but essentially there is a genetic component. There is a part of, and I live with anxiety. Anxiety is a part of my life as well, but I'm really, like you, I've come a long way. Yeah. And it's not something that stops me from doing anything, sometimes to the point of getting on terribly terrifying rides at theme parks. If someone extends the invitation, I won't let my anxiety stop me, of course, as long as something's not dangerous. But yeah, there is a genetic component. And so 30 to 50% of us who have an anxiety disorder will have a parent who has lived with anxiety and struggled with that themselves as well. So, but there are also other things that can contribute. Certainly circumstances. There could be a traumatic event that could really sensitize the part of the brain that detects threat to looking for threat and identifying threat everywhere. Certainly some illnesses can bring on anxiety. And certainly if there's been an illness and then there's been a recovery, there can be a lot of anxiety about what's going to happen next, whether that's for the child or whether or not that's for a parent. And yeah, so and the environment, like it can be, parents don't cause anxiety, but certainly we have a really important role to play in how we help our young people to understand when there is a challenge and anxiety presents, how we can help move them through. Because it's, for example, little ones separating from mum at kinder. And I remember when my children are both home today, actually, both unwell, but 13 and 15. So a long time ago at kinder, I remember a mum having her little one clinging to her leg and wouldn't let go. And obviously it's distressing for the child, it's distressing for the mum. And in the end, the mum was obviously feeling so overwhelmed. She picked up her little one and went home. And so that is, even though it's completely understandable, and we've all made decisions in the moment where we just need to just get out of there. I get that totally. I've done that too. So absolutely no judgment. But just as an example that the child's not feeling relaxed and safe and calm about parting ways, and then picking them up and taking them home almost reinforces that this idea that, well, maybe it's not quite safe and calm and a good place to be. So you are better off with me. And then even though that's not happening at the level of conscious thinking. So just sometimes the way we respond in certain circumstances is either an opportunity to kind of reinforce anxious thinking or help a child recognize that, yes, this is difficult. I don't like this. This is not what I want, but mum and dad are going to help me to feel safe. And, you know, I'm going to learn that I can feel these feelings, but also move forward and do what's important, like going to school.
Yeah, yeah. I can relate to that. And when I was a teenager, but my mum was really, really supportive. But back then, there just wasn't the understanding around it. And I got very good at avoiding the situation. So I can see very clearly that by avoiding any of the, speaking at school after that, it made it worse. So I can totally see that as a little one, and that sort of can reinforce it. And obviously as a parent, you are not wanting to do that at all. It's you want to keep your kids safe. I mean,
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's so, we are wired as parents to feel something. If we didn't feel anything, we wouldn't care. We wouldn't be moved to help. And so it's really tough. And it depends on where we're at ourselves as to how well slept we are, how well supported we are, what else is going on, what we're juggling. And, right now, like for me, for example, like I just as an example, like I had the thought that, and I say that because I was able to observe that I had a thought that I can't do this podcast episode today. I started to go along those lines of thinking, and this is why, because avoidance is a natural response when things, not that it felt unsafe, but it just, so I'll give you the context. So 15 and 13-year-old, both with fevers, but not COVID, but just both feeling rotten. The dog rolled in so much poo last night that we had to lock him out of the bedroom. Not he doesn't go on the bed, but the stench from our beautiful border collie who we adore was so overwhelming that he needed to be sort of secluded. So I had to get up this morning and go and wash him.
Wow.
I've also, that the house is filled with stuff everywhere, which affects my mental health and my well-being, because it's just such a bomb site, because we've been treating nits in the house. And
I mean, it sounds like my house.
It's just, I know, now I want to scratch my head, even though
I know, me too.
Oh my gosh. And so just with absolutely everything that you do as a parent, and then having all these extra things that come on top, like I just sort of felt like, I was playing whack-a-mole and feeling like, maybe I'm not in the right space. I thought, but my motto is, look, I do what's important despite what else is happening. And this is important. It's important for me because I care so deeply about helping. It's important for you for the same reason. Plus, we'd made all these arrangements, and it's a professional thing to do. But avoidance, it's the default setting is I just won't do it. I'll pull back, I'll withdraw, whatever the reason is. And anxiety is one of the main drivers. That just, if the brain's alarm has detected a threat of some sort, like for you speaking, just like, I just won't do it. And then I won't feel those awful feelings. I won't put myself in a vulnerable situation, and I'll be safe.
Yes. Yeah. I just have to say that is so funny that it's not funny, but my 14-year-old's homesick today, and we've also had nits. It's like, what? And also my mental health is does coincide with how my house is. I love decluttering just for that relief. It feels really good.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm having a mental blank, so I will edit this bit.
All good, Meg, all good.
I can't even remember what I was going to say there.
You were just saying about your, I think you were just relating. I think you were just going,
Yeah. And no, don't know. I don't know. Sorry.
Okay,
this is, I had COVID last week. This is part of
my gosh.
Yeah, it's part of my COVID.
Take your time. I get it. And look, this was me yesterday when I was interviewing someone at 6 a.m. because they were on the other side of the blooming planet. And I just couldn't I couldn't think straight just because I was tired, and you've had COVID. So that's even better.
Yes. Oh, thank you. I remember where I was coming from. So when you talked about avoidance there, that is exactly what I have done. Like I said, avoiding speaking, but it's just been the last year or two that, like you did this morning, and I really appreciate you taking us through that, because I think that's really common for so many people. I've actually started doing exactly what you have done and just going, you know what, if it's important or if it's because straight away my head does go to, I don't want to do so-and-so, and it is an anxiety really when I look at it. And I've started doing the hard things and challenging myself, and it's just become a really big thing for me to just feel that fear, step into it and do it anyway. And because of my coaching course, we learnt about getting to that point where you do feel fearful and not stopping, as I have in the past, as many people do, and stepping through it. So a big part of my life now is going out of my comfort zone. And even today, because I had the podcast tonight, I'm starting Toastmasters, which is scary. And I'm starting with a speech, and that is my biggest fear in the whole world. And to be doing that is also the biggest achievement. Like, I'm excited, but I'm still nervous. I am nervous, but I'm stepping into it. And that's the difference these days.
Oh, goodness. You are such a magnificent role model, because I mean, that is huge. I mean, the 17-year-old you with the, the anxiety about speaking in front of a group through to now, and being able to join Toastmasters and not only just go along and listen, but actually share something. I think that's something to be incredibly proud of. And it really is. And I know that the environment that you'll be in tonight will be incredibly supportive, but we can't wait for that anxiety to go. We can't wait. And you said you feel nervous, and I love that you used a different word, because sometimes other words are appropriate. And we feel a lot of anxiety around the things we care about as well. We get nervous because we care about doing a good job. And so that's such a cool thing. And one of the things that I really love to emphasize is this idea that if we wait for the nerves, the anxiety, for those feelings to go, we just won't do anything that really matters, because anything that matters is going to be something we care about. And when we care, there are going to be these feelings that, so yes, your brain has detected some sort of a threat. And when we have that happen, the brain and the body respond in exactly the same way, whether or not you're going to Toastmasters, which is a safe environment. Physically, it's not dangerous, because our brain alarm sounds when danger is detected, and we are powered up to respond to fight or flee, irrespective of whether or not there is a genuine danger or there is a perceived danger or an imagined threat of some sort. And so the beauty of you being able to go, right, I feel all this, I recognize this for what it is, but I know I'm safe, I can continue to move forward. There's so much power in that. And so I really applaud you, and I cannot wait to hear how it goes. And this is just the start of something really big for you. And the fact that you're doing it, even though it's hard, is really beautiful role modeling for everybody listening.
Thank you. It's and you know what, I find with my kids, this has all been just a really nice way to show them that you can do what, your dreams and what you thought was impossible. And I haven't done the speech yet, so I shouldn't. But you know what? The difference now is, if I do feel that my shaking or something comes up, I can say that.
Yes.
Back when I was a kid, I would never have done that. But sort of naming it, owning it, takes it away.
Yes.
I've worked out, so
it does. Yes. Yes. And it just, look, honestly, I almost feel like, because I'm a professional speaker, so this is what I do for a living. I go into schools and workplaces and talk. But I usually say very early on, hey, if you notice, one of the things about me is my breathing. So you notice the shaking and the trembling, and that's because of the adrenaline that's released when you're feeling anxious. I would have short and shallow breathing, and then I'd have to take a big deep breath. And I would say to my audiences, hey, here I'm talking about anxiety. It's really important to me to share with you so you can understand. But also this is really personal because I've had this since I was 4. And you might notice that I do this, and that's because I'm anxious now, but I'm anxious because I care about doing a really good job. And that in itself is a message. And it's also almost permission for people. And I can see you almost opening with this idea that the last time I spoke in front of a group, I felt these same feelings. You might be a bit shaky, and you can almost sort of start with where you were then and what's brought you to here now. And you will just capture everybody's attention because storytelling and those really relatable human experiences help people just to feel so much a part of something and far less alone. And trust me, you will not be the only one there tonight who's feeling like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely gives people permission, I think, and I have written my speech, and I am doing that kind of. It's about our story, so I'm talking about the last time I did a speech. Yeah, and when I did that in year 11 for the HSC, I actually avoided doing the oral exams. I didn't even get the mark I could have, and it was all because I was too nervous to speak. And back then, the teachers didn't know how to deal with that. Now, I do know that when my eldest daughter was in high school, she got to do a speech separately, but with a teacher and a friend. They didn't offer that back when I was younger. And so I missed a huge component of the HSC. So you can see why, when I kind of discovered alcohol, it became a bit, I don't shake. I probably went to a couple of weddings and parties where I could get up and speak because I'd had a few drinks, but then I probably bumbled my way through. But it meant I could eat and drink in front of people at social situations because I couldn't even do that because of my shaking. So I guess, what are some tools or tactics for younger people? And not just, mine was a very physical reaction. So everyone has different anxieties, the way they show. But what are some tools and tactics that we can, talk about for kids? Obviously for adults too, but just to prevent them from having to go down my path.
Yes. Before I do that, if I may, I'd like to share a little bit about normal anxiety versus problematic anxiety. And yes, because what you and I used to is anxiety that essentially gets in the way of daily functioning. And what you've shared, the idea of, how that's impacted your life and what you've missed out on. I'm so pleased to know that you're moving through that. And when I first connected with you today, I thought, Meg is so calm. I just know we are going to just hit it off straight away because you just had this really beautiful calmness about you. So isn't that funny that was my first impression?
Thank you. So yeah.
But so normal anxiety, I think one of the great things that we can do for our young people, our children, no matter what age, is to help our kids learn about anxiety the same way we would teach them about sadness and embarrassment. When your little one loses a toy and we can say to them and they get teary, you can say, I can see you're feeling really sad right now. I'm so sorry that you're feeling sad. And I know what that feels like. And that's really tough. And that's that empathizing. But it's also teaching them to label what they're feeling. And we can do the same with anxiety. If they're feeling a bit nervous about a party, some little kids might feel, I've got the present. What do I do? Do I give it to them? Do I put it on the table? Do I, or I've got a party. Am I opening it when somebody gives it to me? What if someone else arrives when I'm opening a gift? And then I've got another gift. And what if, lots of what if questions. And so if a child's starting to verbalize or you can see physically that they're feeling anxiety, start to talk to them about it because it's completely normal human emotion and it's protective. It arises in the face of a stressor, like presenting in front of a group, but then normal anxiety should settle So most people who are presenting in front of a group will feel anxiety, but it'll settle down once they've done the presentation and they'll go back to normal life. And that's what it is meant to happen. But for some people like you and me, we've had the part of our brain that's more sensitive to threat and detects threat all the time. And so that's the amygdala. So education is a huge part of it. So we've got the normal anxiety, and at the other end of the spectrum, we've got an anxiety disorder. And that is when anxiety is extreme, frequent, and it's getting in the way of daily functioning. And tick, tick, tick for you.
Yeah.
Tick, tick, tick for me. So that education around anxiety, that, yep, we all feel it. It's a normal thing and it doesn't have to stop us. I think that's a huge part of that's one of the really important tools that we can share. Another thing to help young people understand, and so many adults, sometimes I'll be speaking to parents about, I'll be in a school speaking to a group of parents and they're learning about anxiety in children. So often I'll have a parent come up to me and say, oh my goodness, you've just described me and I never knew.
Wow.
So the fact that anxiety shows in 4 distinct ways, and that is how we think, what if questions, lots of worry, sometimes catastrophic thinking, how we feel emotionally. We can get very teary, or we can get irritable and angry, and that's the fight side of the fight or flight. We can feel a lot of physical sensations in our body because our body is being powered up to fight the threat or to flee. And the other side of it is what we do, our behaviors, and that's usually avoidance. That's a huge part of it. So I think helping a young person to go, right, my heart's racing, and to say, oh yeah, your heart's pumping more blood around your body to prepare you for what you're about to do. And to equip young people with this idea that, yes, my body and brain are doing exactly what's necessary in this moment. And that helps take away a lot of the fear from some of the symptoms, because shakiness, like what you experienced, I experienced a lot of numbness and tingling, a lot of trouble with my breathing. I was diagnosed with asthma. There can become a lot of fear and anxiety around those feelings. And what does that mean? And what's wrong with me? And that can spiral into health anxiety, and anxiety can cause panic. So I think having this good understanding that it shows in different ways helps a lot. But when it comes to tools, there are so many different ways to approach it, but I want to share 3 key ones, and I'll keep it brief. The first one is the breath. And so for a young person, the most simple thing that you can say, and we can do this too as adults, is when it comes to our breath, we need to have a longer exhale than we do inhale. And I don't even need to put any rules around it. It can be 4 in and 6 out. It can be 5 in and 8 out. It can be 3 in and 4 out. But if we can help our children to learn this as a calming skill, and that means not just teaching it to them when they're in the midst of stress or anxiety, but this is a powerful, powerful skill we can all apply, that when we can breathe through our nose and out through our nose, if possible, and lengthen that exhale, that actually, through a whole range of processes, tells our brain you're safe and starts to settle down that anxiety response. So that's one strategy that is profound. And it might just be practicing every day, doing 3 of those breaths, and then remembering to call upon that skill when there's an anxious moment. Another tool is movement. And so picture this. You are being followed by somebody as you're walking home. You're 12, your brain has detected this threat, and it is a threat. And so everything changes in your body physiologically to power you up to fight or flee. You run, and you run into a friend's house. Knock on the door, in you go, you're safe. When we are faced with a threat, whether it's real or imagined, the brain and the body power up to do something that requires movement. And so if we're lying in bed, or our little kids are sitting at a table at school, feeling all of this, then they're all powered up with nowhere to go. A bit like all dressed up with nowhere to go, but all powered up. And movement is another really powerful way to help kind of put all of those changes to the use that they're meant for. So even just a sprint for 30 seconds or running on the spot or star jumps or dancing or anything like that, that is high intensity movement for a short period of time, can help to kind of bring that fight or flight response to the end and complete that sort of stress cycle and help us settle back down. And the last one is about using the senses. So just one example for a child could be when they feel these feelings and they recognize that they're feeling stressed or anxious, maybe they're going to use the strategy that is using their eyesight for color. And I used this a little while ago. I noticed I was feeling anxious. I was in the supermarket, my second home, and I was in the cereal aisle, and I felt really teary. And I realized that's one of the signs that I'm highly anxious, is when I just sort of feel teary walking down the cereal aisle in the supermarket, as you do. And so I needed to still collect my shopping, even though the instinct is get out of here. I thought, no, I'm going to put into practice a strategy. So I used my sense of sight, and I used a color strategy. So as I walked down the aisle, I saw, and I'd say silently to myself, this is blue, this is green, that's orange. I see red, pink, green, yellow, blue. And what that does is it gives our mind something to focus on. And it is essentially a grounding strategy. So it's using one of our senses to become more mindful. And what that can do is it can start to settle down the anxious feelings to the point where you're able to then concentrate on what you need to do and move forward. So no matter what age, little people, big kids, adults, we don't have to do it all. It helps to have a couple of things that you can draw on. So if you're highly, highly anxious, so tonight, if you're feeling very anxious, you could try the color strategy. And then you could say, I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to do my breathing. You might not want to run on the spot. You might already feel very, perspiration is a part of the anxiety response. So you might not want to do any exercise. Yeah. But sometimes just one or two in your toolkit are extraordinarily powerful.
Oh, I love all that. And being, you'll probably recognize this, being anxious for all those years, I have done so many different breathing things. And I started ice baths recently. And and funnily enough, someone said what you said when I hopped in. It was like, you're so calm. And I think my breathing is finally coming into play from everything I've learned. But only very recently, just I spoke to Sophie Scott on this podcast, and she mentioned the breathing out longer than breathing in. And you've mentioned it. And I think that is my favorite thing I've ever heard. And I wish I knew that. I just didn't. But I do that quite a lot now. And the color thing's fabulous. I love that too. I'm going to use that. And then when I was home last year, I felt very anxious about a situation, and I got my weights out and I just pumped out for about 30 seconds. So when I'm home and anxious, I do that. So naturally, I've kind of done a few things that you've mentioned, but I also have recommended it to my kids. And I'm actually going to get my daughters to listen to this podcast so they can hear the tools from themselves, because they're so simple. You can take them anywhere with you. The breathing, the color, it's with you all the time. And it, like you said, it's for all ages. So it's just so simple, but so profound when you use them.
So true. And the hardest part almost is remembering to put them into practice. And that's because when the anxiety builds, part of our brain that helps us make good decisions and think rationally, solve problems, all of the things that might be helpful in that moment, that those functions are unavailable to us. And that is for a good reason. If that's the executive functioning part of the brain behind our forehead, and so it's called the prefrontal cortex. When we are highly anxious, that essentially goes offline. It switches off, because when we're anxious, our brain has detected a threat and we needed an our brain has detected threat and we need an immediate life-saving response. And if the executive functioning part of the brain was available, it would be a bit like a committee meeting of the mind. It would take way too long to decide what to do. And so we have an almost reflexive reaction. So if you're walking down a path on a bushwalk and your sense of sight, through your vision, you saw a snake, even though you hadn't sort of consciously registered that, and through your hearing, your brain has detected the rustling of the snake moving, you'll be off that path before you've had a conscious opportunity to go, oh, there's a snake, I need to get out of the way. I mean, if it was much further ahead of you on the path, you would see it and you would have that opportunity to think more about it. But we need to get out of the path before we've had a chance to really think about it, because that's what's going to keep us safe. And so the beauty of understanding how your anxiety shows and recognizing it when it's starting is that you can go, oh, this is anxiety. I know what to do. So like for me in the supermarket, I was able to go, right, I know what this is. I can feel it before it kind of gets full blown. I mean, and it all happens very, very quickly. So it takes time. It takes time. And I can say, it's my breathing. I can get teary. And sometimes I'll notice I'm a bit shaky, but that's not usually one of my first symptoms. I was so anxious. I was presenting at I was part of a touring conference. It's called the Positive Schools Conference. And we did 4 cities in Australia. And it's, you join the conference by invitation, and it's a real honor and a privilege to be part of this conference. And you get 25 minutes, which is when you're like me and you could talk the leg off a chair underwater and all that jazz. 25 minutes is, you really want to nail it. Sorry. And so I remember for my first presentation, and Michael Carr-Gregg was in the audience, and other really well-known and highly regarded speakers were there. So not only that, you're speaking to teachers, you're speaking to your peers.
Wow.
My anxiety, you can only imagine. And I was sitting there and I was pulling every tool out of the toolkit. I was like, right, I'm going to look for yellow. I'm going to look for everywhere I can see yellow. And I just picked one color. I'm like, there's yellow, there's yellow. And I'm like, I'm breathing. Okay, I'm going to do my breathing. And then I'm going to ground. I'm going to push my feet into the floor. And I'm going to pay attention to my feet on the floor. And I knew how anxious I was. It had evolved to a point that it was pretty hard to dial back. But the minute I got on that stage, I said, it's a joy to be here. And this is professional and this is personal. And I'm anxious right now. And I just owned it and called it out and said, awesome. Which is what we were talking about before. But sometimes we can catch it early. Sometimes we're in situations that are highly anxiety provoking, and just we can do what we can, but we also have to hold true to the fact that if we've practiced enough, we're prepared enough, that it will settle. And once we're finished, we'll be super proud of ourselves and it will settle down and we'll be able to relax once it's all over.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And I think practice is important. I think we become more aware of it the more we do it, obviously. And it means we can reach for those tools in the situation. And I think for me, because I'm coming up 18 months of no alcohol, I think that's given me the clarity to actually work on all these tools I've accumulated over the last 30 years. But now I finally can just focus on that. And I just wanted to touch on, anxiety. And I just wanted to touch on alcohol with anxiety, because by the end, my anxiety disorder had not only come back badly, but I couldn't sit in the staff room and eat with other people anymore. And it was because of anxiety, the next day after drinking. And it's just, logically, I knew the alcohol wasn't helping the anxiety, but in the moment it was. But that became a massive reason I had to stop drinking, because it was just getting worse and worse, and I didn't want that anymore. So what is your kind of experience or take on that? How do you talk to people about alcohol with anxiety?
Yes, I applaud you, because when you've relied on alcohol for stress and anxiety management, it's a journey to let go and it's a journey that's reinforced by how much better you feel when you use other healthier coping strategies. So I genuinely applaud you, because middle-aged women like us, it is a huge issue, and it's a growing area of alcohol consumption. And it's, there's a lot of stress. I think that goes without saying. There's a lot of stress and a huge mental load. And yes, immediately when we drink, we feel that stress relief. It's that dopamine, that serotonin that's released in the brain that make us feel good and relaxed. And it's just like that beautiful feeling. We those of us that have ever had alcohol will know that feeling. But what we also know is it doesn't last very long. The alcohol. So at the same time that you consume alcohol, which is a depressant, the brain recognizes that, okay, think of like a bit of a seesaw, and we've got the depressant, which is sort of tipping us in one direction. But to maintain that balance of that seesaw in the brain, there'll be a release of adrenaline and cortisol. And guess what's released when we're anxious? Adrenaline and cortisol. And so we're getting a release of these neurotransmitters that are a part of the anxiety response. But what happens is, once we've consumed the alcohol and the alcohol starts to wear off, let's just say we're at a baseline of serotonin, which is our kind of happy hormone, our feel-good hormone. That gets increased when we drink. And then when the alcohol wears off, it drops, but it doesn't drop back to where we started. It drops below the level of where we started. So we actually end up feeling worse. And we feel worse. We've got this sensation of agitation, this cortisol and adrenaline that can start us feeling a bit anxious, edgy. And so the reinforcing factor here is that we'll reach for another drink to start that cycle again. So alcohol, it's so interesting, and it's been a really big journey for me, because I do still drink alcohol, but only on occasion. And the reason that I have stopped drinking for the most part is because of my anxiety as well. And what I've learned through doing my own podcast and speaking to people like yourself who are helping others learn about why alcohol is just so detrimental to health and well-being and mental health. I've learned a lot, as you do when you're a podcast host. So my journey through COVID here in Melbourne was the same as most people in parts of the country that were heavily locked down. Was highly stressful, understatement. 2 kids, homeschooling, running a business, trying to adapt my business as a speaker to online and meet the needs of clients in different ways. And I'm really glad my husband went to work every day, because just one more person in the house would have been one too many. And at least he could come back with a bit of a freshness from the day. And we started drinking every day, which is something we'd never done before. So we would have a G&T every afternoon. And that was a coping mechanism. When all the lockdowns got lifted, we went back to our usual of having a G&T on a Friday and a Saturday night, maybe one or the other, maybe 1, maybe 2 drinks. And then what we've arrived at now, fast forward, obviously all this time later, is that we don't drink at home. And the reason, as I said, that we've done that is because it feels good in the moment. I like the feeling, but I don't like how I feel that evening, and I don't like how I feel the next day. It can ultimately make your anxiety worse. It's a really unhealthy coping mechanism. Terribly interferes with sleep, which is an absolute cornerstone of our mental health and well-being. And when you have anxiety, if you don't sleep well, it's just like turning that dial up to 100. And so, whether or not you get restless legs, you might pass out. I mean, I never drink enough to have that experience, but some people will drink, say, a bottle of wine in an evening, pass out and go, oh, it's great for sleep. But the quality of sleep is affected. You will wake in the night and may not be able to get back to sleep. And I also think about what I'm teaching my kids as well. And so we've been enjoying a whole lot of different alcohol-free alternatives.
Oh,
And then
wow.
now we're at the point where I'll take that if I go out to someone's place, or New Year's Eve, I'll always drive. I'll take my alcohol-free alternatives. But every now and again when I go out for dinner, I'll still have a glass of wine or a cocktail. But I must admit, I wake the next day and I really feel regretful, because I understand exactly what it's doing. So I'm on my own journey towards potentially stopping altogether, but my drinking is not problematic.
No.
I mean, it was problematic in lockdown. I mean, that wasn't healthy at all. There's no healthy level of drinking. That's the bottom line. It's a toxin. And so, so that's kind of my own personal story, but also, you know, where we are with the neurotransmitters in the brain, and that ultimately drinking alcohol will make your anxiety worse.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing. And it is so hard to keep drinking when you know all this, isn't it?
I know.
It's and even for me, I found one drink, I'd get a headache after it, you know, and the sleep. Exactly. I did I've got a online course I'm offering people, and one of the parts is on sleep, and some of the research was that even one drink will change your sleeping, and we just don't get the sleep that we need. And a huge contributor to all sorts of problems. But it's been a while, but my sleeping is so good now. And I do breathing just even for 10 seconds before I go to bed. I do say 4 in, 6 out. So I do that. And I've never fallen asleep so quickly. So I'm very happy that that's come out of this stopping drinking and everything, and probably contributed to reducing my anxiety, along with just getting rid of the alcohol. But I think a lot more people like you are becoming aware and choosing these amazing non-alcoholic drinks that we have now, and cutting down. But for me, that wasn't really just an option. I had to, I was drinking a lot more, so it was problematic. But it all comes back to self-medicating, and so that's why I want to get the word out. And your information has just been so valuable. And it's the hindsight, and I don't regret anything because it's got me where I am. But if we knew this information back then, would have changed a lot of things. But that's okay. We know it now, and
that's right.
Can, help others. So
exactly. And there's a meme that you'll see every now and again that it says something along the lines of, I know what you're going through is hard right now, but one day your experiences and your story will be an inspiration for others. And it's really case in point for you. And I've been through a whole lot of challenges with my mental health as well. And you could never believe at the time that anything good could come from such diabolical, distressing experiences. But I think that people, and what I find is that people really, when you've been through it and you've experienced it and you've come out the other side, it gives people so much hope that they can do the same thing. And so what you're doing with your podcast and sharing your journey, which takes courage and vulnerability to put it out into the world, that this is your experience and these are the steps you're taking. It's I think it gives people a lot of hope and confidence that even though change can be really hard, that it is absolutely possible, and it's worth tolerating the discomfort and the going through the challenge to create a better life for yourself.
Yes, it is so worth it. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, Jodi, thank you so much for coming on today. I think this is just going to be so helpful to so many people, including my daughters.
Yes.
But, I've learned even more, today, and it's just been so great to chat to you. So thank you. And where can we find you? And you've got some great books. Can you just tell us a bit about that?
Yes. Dr. Jodi Richardson. So DRJODI Richardson.com is my website. And you'll find me on Instagram. Come say hello on Instagram. with the same handle. And also I have my podcast, which is called, well, Hello Anxiety. And gorgeous Meg here, who I've just been speaking with, I've invited to be a guest because I'd really love to bring your story to my listeners. So that's here. You can find me in lots of different places.
Excellent. I'll put it in the show notes as well so everyone can find you. And I can't wait to come on your podcast.
I know. So thank you again for having me. It's been really a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jodi.